Good evening, everybody. System Chalk here with the 156th episode of the House of Light expansion, our first run through YouTube. Expansion to Book of Hours, playing as the Archaeologist. Now, there's a couple of things that we'll do to set up today, and then I wanted to try and get something not really, well, I guess I'm announcing it now, but I am going to be out of the country for an extended period of time in August. Now, the specific details in terms of what this means for the channel is still sort of up for debate, and part of that's going to be a question of how many episodes I can get recorded ahead of time. But I just wanted to try and telegraph where I can. Also, if you're somebody who watches the Twitch channel and subscribes, I wanted to try and communicate that there will be sort of a planned absence. And in the case of YouTube, obviously people aren't paying a monthly subscription, but I know in the case of Twitch, the subscription is a forward-looking purchase. So I wanted to try and, you know, for people who have a certain expectation in terms of what they'll be getting for that, I wanted to try and say that ahead of time, and the YouTube channel happens to be a good way to communicate that. And then, of course, for this series here, it's highly unlikely we are going to finish the House of Light run before I have to go. So the plan here is to try and record something ahead of time, but I may not be able to keep the usual release cadence that I have, because it's I probably would need to do... I definitely need to do multiple weeks in a very short period of time. But our focus is going to be on today, so I've got a couple things that I need to do. I believe one of them was to generate a taste, and then I notice here it says use Inks of Revelation. But what I think is also true is I've sort of run out of things that I can potentially put the points towards. And in fact, I'm noticing here, so I'm actually going to use Illumination as an example. For Illumination, I've got a series of skills that have numbers beside them. So Meniscate Reflections is listed at number 3, whereas Purifications and Exaltations has a 6 beside it. Actually, I think Purifications... No. Should be here. I could be using it to read a book, I suppose, but let's take a quick peek. Oh, here it is. So that's at 6, and as you can see, it's already in the position. So some of what's happening here is I'm slotting in a few of the skills that I've already got. So in the case of something like Hushery, I have a rough idea in terms of the ordering of certain items, although Sights and Sensations is clearly the only one that's in the top slot right now. So what I want to be doing here is looking at some of the skills that have sort of freedom within a certain range, and see if there are any eligible candidates. So Meniscate Reflections was one, but Meniscate Reflections is Forge and Edge, so that doesn't help me as far as the Inks of Revelation are concerned. Coil and Chasm and Lockworks and Clockworks are also options. Now again, Lockworks and Clockworks is a knock, and then Coil and Chasm, I believe, is Scale and Nectar, so that doesn't really help us on the Moth front. Furs and Feathers is a Scale, and Desires and Dissolutions was a possibility, but that doesn't have Moth. And then Herbs and Infusions, I think, was something we still hadn't figured out yet, but that's Heart and Nectar. So similar problem here in the sense that, you know, I've got some free agents basically, but none that sort of relate to the Inks of Revelation. So I might as well just finish off the list here. So Edicts Inviolable, Magaphine Mysteries. I think Magaphine Mysteries is actually quite low. And then Hill and Hollow, which again doesn't have the Lantern or the Moth. Stone Stories I've actually listed to go to a higher branch, and I can't remember the rationale why, but that's a Nectar and Scale one for sure. So Rhyme and Remembrance was one that I think I was going to use for Birdsong, if I'm not mistaken. But that one has Moon. You'll notice, by the way, that there's a lot of Moon in the list here, and I'm definitely going to be I'm going to be adjusting my plans accordingly. And then Path and Pilgrim I know had a rose, but I'm pretty sure it doesn't have a lantern or a moth. So yeah, as you can see here, basically we don't have a whole lot to go with as far as the Inks of Revelation are concerned, which is fair enough, right? You know, we're at a point now where we just, you know, we've got a lot leveled up, we've got a lot committed. So one of the best things I could do here with Inks of Revelation is just take a look at what's sort of low on the list. So right now in terms of Lantern, it looks like Inks of Revelation is my lowest level skill for that, whereas for Moth, looks like it's Rites of the Roots that's lower. So in this case here, probably what I'll want to do is toss some points towards Rites of the Roots. Of course, the Impulse will keep us from doing that for a while. The other thing that's nice, of course, is that I only need 3 memories for that, so I don't need to excuse me. I don't really need to move heaven and earth to kind of get the just the memory out of the way, the lessons out of the way, rather. But the other thing that I want to do is do a quick inventory of anything that gives me Lantern or Moth. I think we should be clear of most of it, but there's a few things here which definitely... Okay, so for instance, Resurgences and Emergences, that one's got a Moth side to it. Transformations and Liberations for sure. Edicts Liminal. Book of Masks. Now the good news here is we definitely have some heart stuff that needs tending. Okay, Twin Serpent Tantra. Shaven Lock Tantra. So kind of doing what I'm doing with... Okay, it's not as bad as I thought. And then... Yeah, Book of the White Cat. Because it's Watchman's Paradoxes, we've got some sky that we can put some things towards. But what I want to keep in mind for... sorry, which book was it? 5 Creations. What this basically means is that I need to be treating something like Resurgences and Emergences as effectively a Grail lesson. So if I take a look at my, my to-do list here, I don't think Pearl and Tide has a Grail. I think that's a heart. No moon. Coil and Chasm, Clockworks, oh, Desires and Dissolutions. Yeah, so that would be a good candidate for it, actually. So in this case, something like 5 Creations would go towards something like Desires and Dissolutions, and if I don't have an example like that, Sea Stories is another candidate. I want to sort of knock that off the list. So if I have something, for instance, like Inks of Revelation, that's now not just a free one, but it's completely free in the sense that there's no other slot that I can put that in. So I'm going to take a minute here I'm going to let this all run down. The focus here is still on using the taste. All right, as I used to say in my youth, the day is done and so am I, but I've earned my pay. It is autumn when the leaves rustle. The silent landlady has served me apple pie with steamed cream in the window nook. So in 16 seconds, we will generate the taste. I should already have water ready. Yep. The remaining books should already be generating the memories that I need. And then we should have some leftover time at the end of the day. The skill is now level 7. Its power aspects have also increased. Now I should also take a second here. I think Leaves and Thorns was due to go higher still. So in fact, if that's true, I kind of know what I want to use the Grail for. Oh, well, there it is. Right. That's why I need to generate the taste. I guess we can use the shaft here. Drink the stuff. This will consume the beverage. Sorry, the beverage. If it's a whole bottle, consider serving it first so you don't drink the whole thing. Oh, let's read the books. 3 flowers hath the tree. Ernestine Peterhans records her observations of the groves of trees and flowers around the isle and the omens and portents she attempts to draw from them, particularly the yew tree in Earl Brian's meadow, whose flowerings are sometimes eccentric. Ernestine observes that in years when the tree flowers black, troubling secrets arise. When it flowers red, war and fires follow, and that no de Wolf heir has ever been born in a year where it flowers white. Ernestine attempts to use the tree's growth to advantage in her business affairs, but it fails. She is evidently very concerned when Hendrik de Wolf's grandson Giles runs off with a pale trollop Hafren in a year when the tree flowers white. She begins to fear that she has entirely misinterpreted all the relevant omens. She is deeply concerned for the continuation of the de Wolf line and prays for Giles' return. So we need 7 for the Grail and Nectar. An Echo of Silence, a very heterodox history of the House of Leith as recorded by the Serenity, a Leithian adept who declares that the House of Leith was created explicitly to prevent the ascension of any more mortals to name or hour status. Eternity cannot be escaped, but in history it may be delayed, the Serenity explains. The gods who are flesh by their nature are a surrender to eternity. The roots of the house are said to pass into the Wood of Dreams through 3 forests in the Bounds, identified as the Bailai, the Black Cedar Forest, and the Brecliant. While one tree of these may yet stand, one single tree, the histories continue. Really need to get better at reading that. 2 Wombs, 1 Heart. A fanciful account by Thirza Blake of the early life of the twins, their time as mortals before they became hours or even long, in a dry kingdom beyond the Western Sea, which Thirza suggests might have been ancient Mexico. It is widely known that the sister was rich and the witch poor. It is widely known that the witch loved the sister first. It is not widely known that the witch was first employed to teach the sister the arts of embroidery. Although Thirza is very probably just making up much of the story, there are long passages expounding notable techniques of weave work and thread fight. In particular, when witch and sister flee across the sea to be together, Thirza explains how they fashioned a peace weave with Heart and these arts, and then, to tame the winds, called on Heart again to swaddle the thunder in the peace weave. So 4 of the 7. The Sun Disfigured, a scroll of anthropoderm parchment written in the golden ink called Uzalt. This book houses a numen, a truth so powerful it can perhaps believe itself. The author of the text calls herself the Elegabline. Sometimes she seems to be Sunset Celia, the watchman's name. Sometimes she seems to be Lady Tryphon, the Grail-long. It is unclear whether these are separate entities or the same person. It may be unclear even to the writer. The flaws in the Sun's plan are elucidated. The plan itself is never entirely clear, but it is a project of some kind to enter, possess, or surrender to the glory, the pure light above the mansus. This book suggests ways in which that plan might fail. The Sun's sins and the Sun's scars are our salvation. There are histories where they will trap us, prevent us rising to eternity. The Intimations of Skin, fiendishly complex, weirdly distorted illustrations of Congress and anatomy by the haunted visionary painter Niels Fredrik Malsker. Malsker illuminates the evolutions of the names of the Grail with unfortunate clarity. It seems that a lovely who consumes an ivory becomes an ivory, a lovely who consumes a thirstly becomes a thirstly, a lovely who consumes a name of another hour might take its place. In the penultimate illustration, a lovely grapples with a fungoid knot that can only be a name of the crowned growth. The lovely's mouth and other portals gape wide, and the growth name is already partially engulfed, but it seems that Malsker couldn't bring himself to illustrate the result, and the final illustration is only a scrawled, bloated obscurity. Now, I have a little bit of work to do here, so just as a reminder in terms of my overall goals, Leaves and Thorns goes to 8, so we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of the 7 required. In 28 seconds, we will get the 7th. Now, the next thing that I need is Inks of Revelation. or rather what I'm going to use to level up Inks of Revelation, or sorry, what I'm going to use to level up a skill using Inks of Revelation. That's Rites of the Roots. So that's a question of Moth and Nectar. So the Impulse is a good place to start, but of course it carries with it, sorry, I should also set aside something to level up the items. Sure, we'll use a Tryst. So I'll go for Core in this case. So yeah, one of the impulses is kind of a no-brainer at this point, although I don't recall, I guess we did an Echo of Silence, so the Debate of 7 Cups. So that's one of 3. But again, the Moth is not the easiest to pick up out of all of these. Or Nectar, for that matter. I do believe we're going to need alternatives. So, one obvious answer will be to use the Sun Disfigured again. And then we will use Scent, but I need to do that after 28 seconds and using these. Okay. So I'm going to we'll use the metal for the Scent. Not super confident in this, but I'll also create a Hive's Lament. Gives me another Nectar and Moth to deal with. I can leave 30 seconds. I can do this overnight because it only takes 30 seconds, but I want to make sure I'm not setting myself up for disappointment. So I won't have any more reading to do. That's fine. I've already set aside the Tryst, so 1 for the Fet. 1 for the Tryst. For the Fost. I guess we've usually used Guy Stories here. Okay, so that's 3... Or sorry, that's the extras dealt with. Because I can, I'll drop some more water. And while I wasn't originally... Actually, you know what, let's... I only have 1 of these, so I can do Honeyscar Jasmine, or I can do Fragrant Chalice, or Pears. I'll do Fragrant Chalice again. I think I've probably overcorrected at this point, but... And let's make it Orchids and Narcotics. I don't want to accidentally put Leaves and Thorns or Rites of the Roots, because that sort of messes with my ability to level things up when I want. And finally... I'll want to set aside 1 more for getting a Newman back. I mean, there's other things I can do too. I could try making another Solomon's Preparation. Actually, nothing's stopping me. Could probably even use Ava's Locks. Am I really that short on them? I don't think that's true. Now the tricky part here is going to be the fact that I have other things that I want to accomplish. So if I believe we have another day in autumn to go, I don't think it would hurt for us to... I was originally thinking, like, let's try and clear out things like 5 creations. I think we'll still do it, but maybe I should have put some thought into where I get my moth from as well. The water of the Isle has a very faint, very distinctive taste, sometimes described as apple shroomy. Alright. So first things first, we want to level up the hard-to-level skill. At last, I approach mastery. Improve the skill to level 8. Now we're actually close enough here. Well, I was going to say we may be close enough here, but I still need to read the Sun Disfigured, so not much I can do about that. What I may do as an intermediate step, though, is I'm going to read another impulse book just in case I feel the need for some extra mod. I don't think it's likely I will, but it doesn't really hurt anything to do that. And in this case, because we've got the surplus of the metal in the shaft, I will go to the Sweet Bones and earn some money. Another thing that I can do, because we've had a couple of days now where I've got free elements of the soul and we have some unopened rooms, I don't necessarily need to bring in the extra hired help, but it might not be a bad idea for me to do that, just simply because, you know, I've already got other, like, I just don't really have there's not the same demand for the for those elements of the soul. So for instance here, yeah, I can hire Denzil with the metal in the shaft, but I don't necessarily need Denzil for that many things. You know, I don't think we're actually at a point yet where I can open the impermeable cell with him. Maybe the wing-haunted cave, I just haven't put a whole lot of thought into it, but it's not a bad example about where I might want to, I may want to reconsider how I'm spending my time. And it's not that I dislike using those extra followers, it's just I have other things to do with the elements of the soul. So now is a time where I can say, you know, maybe I don't have quite the same pressure to use those resources like I used to. Okay. So in 0.5 seconds, we should just be able to raise up the Inks of Revelation, but let's just confirm that. All right, the Debate of 7 Cups, Distillations of Spirit, recorded by an alchemist who identifies himself in the foreword as but Sir Thomas Browne's reflection. Time is a pure flame, and we live by an invisible sun within us. Darkness and light divide the course of time, and until that course is run, eternity remains history's bedfellow. Sorrow then is sense's final solvent, and even a tear, should it fall now, might destroy a stone. A scroll of anthropoda and parchment written in the golden ink called Uzalt. The author of the text calls herself the Allegablin. Sometimes she seems to be Sunset Celia, the Watchman's name. Sometimes she seems to be Lady Tryphon, the Grail-Long. It is unclear whether these are separate entities or the same person. It may be unclear even to the writer. The flaws in the Sun's plan are elucidated. The Sun's plan itself is never entirely clear, but it is a project of some kind to enter, possess, or surrender to the glory, the pure light above the mantis. This book suggests ways in which that plan might fail. Alright, so there's 2 of the 3 memories we require. 29 seconds, that is a narrow window. In fact, it's longer than what we needed here. So that's unfortunate, but not a lot that I can do about it right now. So what I'll do instead, I'll go to Ambrose's desk. I'm trying to think if I want to read one of these other ones or not, but for now we'll settle for the Sun Disfigured one more time. This is just because if we go for Rights the Roots right now, I'll maybe confirm this. So I'm not quite ready to give up the occult scrap. The curious hunch might be kind of interesting if I have the extra day. I'm not super opposed to it, but I don't quite see the same need. Yeah, I'm actually going to change this up a little bit. So because I've got 29 seconds, I might as well get this scent. There's not a whole lot that's going to change on the impulse front. Investigate the object. Watchful potted plant. Not everything needs eyes. I don't think we're going to be able to use another element of the soul to earn some money. That's not the end of the world, though. Does a lot with silence, this man. Night has fallen, dawn will come soon, so we want to be reasonably prompt when picking up our various items. Okay, gather in autumn, unexpected finds in the folds of earth and sky. Yew blank, a wood sacred to the Malachite, who is also called the ring yew, but also the tree that the dead pass in the dark. Sea-strewn, salt-snared stuff, driftwood fragment. Long ago, there was a forest between the waves of Brankrug Bay. This driftwood is not nearly that old, but it shared salt with its lost forerunners. Gather the scented blossoms of the fragrant chalice, a glorious globe of wine-colored flowers. Kukurbit Prisoner Records, 1927. Accounts by Governor Collar's private secretary of interventions and experiments in the last years of the Kukurbit prison, focusing particularly on prisoners he believes might have Carapace Cross lineage. 2 prisoners suspected of Aniric crimes are encouraged to access their inner Carapace Cross tendencies and develop the attributes of the Seglaz kind, sickle-formed pseudocrustacea. Regrettably, they lose the ability to breathe air. One dies and Collars releases the other into the sea. Collars describes how he successfully induced an unstable carapace larva to develop into a greater form, using insects and nectars techniques in the context of considerable moon aspect to awaken what would rather remain hidden. He hopes that similar techniques might be used to expedite the moral development of prisoners. So we'll restore the impulse there. The sense of awareness persists, but the plant remains immobile, unsettling but harmless. It doesn't even have thorns. Hive's Lament, a buzzing in the skull, a song of pragmatic sorrow. A little water splashes on the stones of the well to nourish the mosses there. I don't think we've got a pitcher of water on the bridge anymore. Scraps from the Isle's Edge, so the heart memory doesn't do that much for me. Alright, so let's sort out our priorities. We've got the rights of the roots, which I'll advance ahead of time. So here I'll use the scent, the impulse, and we already know that we're reading the Sun Disfigured, so I don't want to waste this one. Another fruit plucked from Knowledge's tree, improve the skill to level 4. This also means that I can use the Hive's Lament, if I need, but in this case I'll say I do. So again, these kind of go unused, but we have enough to take us through one more day. With Keeper level Winter, Solomon's preparations are a precursor to the Great Ink Nillicant. So I didn't exactly need a second one of these. If anything, it's a little bit of a pain to store. But I had an opportunity. So yeah, I think I'll try my chances with help I find at the Sweet Bones. That doesn't strike me as a bad use of the time. I do want to read a book, and that's actually where it gets a little more challenging. So I can definitely see any of these being used. And I'm slightly inclined on trying 5 creations, but of course the challenge here is that presumably I'm going to want to put that towards some kind of grail objective. And I guess I just took care of leaves and thorns. But I could put some towards sea stories, I suppose. In fact, I'm getting a few ideas for sea stories. Okay, I think I know how I want to spend the day. In truth, I actually kind of feel like I would prefer to be using the... I'd kind of prefer to be reading these books, seeing as we haven't already leveled up sea stories, but because there's a lot of stuff that wants moon, I'm thinking maybe some of the logic of applying the grail. So actually I'll take one more second here. If I just say, let's focus on grail and what I can potentially level up. So Tridesma Hyra is already 9. We already have put Great Signs and Great Scars into the tree. Leaves and Thorns we just finished. Orchids and Narcotics we already said was at 6. I believe Applebright Euphonies we also assigned to 5, although I don't believe I actually locked that into the tree. Not yet, but I definitely know it's where it needs to be. So Sea Stories is one of the free ones, Desires and Dissolution. Oh yeah, well that's... Well, yeah, so Sea Stories and Desires and Dissolutions effectively are the same thing. Okay. So I guess then the question is, why do I want to prioritize Sea Stories over Desires and Dissolutions? And I don't have a good answer for that. I may just as easily put it in there. Horns and Ivories, we've got nothing for. Insects and Nectars, we don't have a nectar component for from the book that we're going to be reading. Yeah, okay. So I feel reasonably good about using 5 creations. I may need a little help memory-wise, but let's just see what we can do. But it does mean that I want to... I really need to smarten up just in terms of making sure that those lessons are applied and applied quickly. Okay, so my best moth to put towards it... I don't think I can do this from memory. Transformations and Liberations, presumably. Yeah. And that is a 14. So... I mean, I'm sort of there, but we'll just use the Sun's Weakness because I don't, like... What else am I going to use the time for, right? So, I can master this mystery. Enough moth to match mystery moth. Okay. There's a couple things that I want to do on my way to the level. So first thing I want to do is get the Newman back because the Grail will be helpful here. And then I was originally gonna try and queue up all the Grail and Moon that I had in mind, but I actually think I'll do that at the start of the next episode. General idea here is that regardless of whether I'm going to be moving up Desires and Dissolutions or Sea Stories, I'm going to need 3 and then 4 Grail and Moon memories. So we've probably got more opportunities for Moon than others. It's also worth remembering, though, depending on who I get from the Sweet Bones. In fact, I might bring in Denzel and then someone for the Sweet Bones as well, just so that I can take advantage of the... Yeah, what visitors might be passing through. So in this case here, I can use Denzel to generate some memories while we see if there are other individuals who stop by. I'm not necessarily committing myself to using one of the unusual visitors, but this is just an opportunity for me to try and get a little bit more done at the end of the season. And then when winter comes, we can recalibrate and see, do I want to put the same emphasis on skills, or maybe I'm, for one reason or another, unhappy with the books that I've got here, and then, we'll go a bit further into the house to pick them up. All questions that will be answered over the course of the next week. So thank you very much for watching. I will see you all on Wednesday's episode. Until then, take care.